Hello, good afternoon. On behalf of the ISO, I'd like to welcome you to the 2025 Flexible Capacity Needs Assessment meeting to discuss the draft 2025 Flexible Capacity Needs and Availability Assessment Hours Technical Study, which was posted on April 11th. My name is Elena Kopolov-Alford, representing ISO Stakeholder Affairs, and I'll be facilitating today's meeting. I'm joined by Clyde Lutan, Principal and Renewable Energy Integration, Hong Zhu, Lead Market Development Analyst in Short-Term Forecasting, and Jessica Stewart, Senior Energy Meteorologist. This presentation and other materials related to this meeting can be found on the Recurring Process page. You can get to that page by going to CAISO.com, navigate to the Stay Informed tab, and go to Policy Initiatives, and that'll take you to our main initiative landing page. And then on the right-hand side, there's a link to the Recurring Process page. And from that page, you can navigate to the Flexible Capacity page there, and that's where you will also be leaving your comments. Okay, so let's go over a couple housekeeping reminders before we get started. This call is being recorded for informational and convenience purposes only. Any related transcription should not be reprinted without the ISO's permission. These meetings are intended to stimulate open dialogue and engage different perspectives, but please keep your comments professional and respectful. And please try to be brief and refrain from repeating what's already been said so we can manage our time efficiently. If you need technical assistance during the meeting, please send a chat to the event producer. I think the event producer is listed as Intelor Events, and their name is Yolan. So raise your hand if you connected to the computer through WebEx or use the Call Me option. You can select the raise hand icon at the bottom of your screen. If you dialed into the phone only line, please select #2, and that will enter you into the question queue. And please remember to state your name and affiliation before making your comment or asking your question. So the objective today is to discuss the assumptions, methodology, and draft results of the monthly flexible capacity requirements and availability assessment hours technical study, and specifically calculating monthly flexible capacity requirements for all LRAs within the ISO footprint for RA compliance year 2025 and advisory requirements for compliance years 2026 and 2027. So our agenda today is Clyde is going to start with the background and a process review, and then we'll hand it over to Hong for the overview of the methodology used for the system and local availability assessment hours. I'm going to hand it over to Clyde.
Good afternoon, everyone. So this is not new. We have been doing this for a while. Those of you who are new to flex capacity resource adequacy, please feel free to stop me anytime during this presentation. Sorry about that. I'm babysitting my daughter's dog. Of all time, this is when he decides to misbehave. Okay, so resource adequacy. The intent here is to ensure load-serving entities contract for adequate capacity to meet expected flexible capacity each month. So year ahead, LSCs need to secure a minimum of 90% of the next year's monthly needs. Month ahead, that's 100% plus a reserve margin, and embedded in that number is flex capacity needs, which is the 3-hour ramp plus a contingency reserve requirement. We talk a little more about what that entails a few slides down. All resources participating in the ISO market under an RA contract, they need to have a must-offer obligation. We talk about that again. And they are required to submit economic bids in the ISO's real-time market consistent with the category, and how it's going to go into the 3 different categories we have currently. And that's about it for slide 6. Next slide, please. So what we do, and we mentioned this back in February, We do a binding 5 minutes, not 5 minutes, but flex capacity requirement for 2025, and then we do an advisory for 2026 and 2027. In order to do this flex capacity analysis, we send surveys out in December each year to load-serving entities. We collect that data back. Some of the things we ask for, the expected monthly renewables, wind, solar, and then the breakdown, is it going to be tracking, non-tracking? We also ask load-serving entities that's contracted with renewables outside the ISO's footprint to let us know if that energy is going to be coming in as firm or dynamics. So if it's coming in as dynamic schedules, the ISO has an obligation to smoothen that variability that we see every 4 seconds. So this is why today we include flex capacity if it's coming in from outside the ISO's footprint as a dynamic schedule. We include that in our flex analysis. So we ask load-serving entities, they have a better feel as to what capacity of renewables is coming in, which month, and then we use the month that the capacity is expected to be in service to do our scaling. So the reason why we mentioned this again back in February, we could do a scaling is because we have a lot of renewables. And when you have a lot of renewables, and the addition is, less than about 2,000 megawatts per category per year, you can scale by capacity to get a feel as to what the variability is going to be during the month. So next slide, please. Okay, so when we collect the data from load-serving entities in mid-January, we go through every single submittal, and we break that out by wind, solar, and then if you look at this, this is the hybrids that's expected to come in. We know what we had in 2023, but expected to come in from January 2024 through December 2027. At the very bottom, we show the batteries that is expected to come in. We do not include the batteries in the flex capacity analysis, but the variable energy resources we do include. So as you can see at the very top, we have very little wind that's expected to come in as hybrid during the next 3 years. Now, Elena, I cannot see if anybody has their hands up, so can you just let me know if anyone has questions? Next slide, please.
For sure. I'll let you know if I see any questions in the chat or any hands raised.
Yeah. So co-located, we have quite a few co-located expected to be in by 2027. It's pretty close to about 12,000 megawatts. And this includes batteries again at the bottom. So in some cases, we do see existing solar plants converted to co-located, and then also we have co-located, basically solar and batteries coming in as new additions to the system. So the hybrids and the co-located, they go into the flex capacity analysis. Slide 10, please. And slide 10, we also asked load-serving entities to submit, or the scheduling coordinators to submit, the expected behind-the-meter capacity. And the yellow solid is the capacity we receive from the load-serving entities, and you can see we expect quite a bit, roughly 24,500 megawatts by 2029 timeframe. And then what the CEC does, they convert that into an expected production. So the dash yellow next to the solid is what the CEC expect to see as actual production from behind-the-meter renewables. one more slide, and then we'll pause there to see if there are any questions on this slide. So this is a summary of the first few slides. I just realized I forgot to put dynamic schedules in there. But when you go through these slides, when you see existing, this is existing at the end of the year. So this is what we saw in December 2023. Expected in 2024 and 2025 is at the end of 24 and 25. And again, this information that you see is what was submitted by load serving entities. The green is the behind the meter that's not included in the flex capacity analysis, but we do show it here just as an indication as to how much variable energy resources we have on the system. It's quite a bit when you look at the solid blue that shows the total internal and dynamically scheduled variable energy resources that's included. It's a lot, it's about 25,000 megawatts. And then when you look at behind the meter, it's quite a bit, it's over 15,000 megawatts. So 25 and 15, you're looking at 40,000 megawatts of capacity that impacts system frequency, it impacts variability, and hence the need for flexible capacity is more and more important. And right here, we did not include this, but I just remembered something that NERC is working on that really solidified the need for flexible capacity. That standard, NERC is working on 3 new standards. 2 should be out next year, and the intent is to look at energy needs as opposed to capacity needs. What NERC found out is a lot of balancing authorities focused on capacity, which means if you know the capacity for the month is going to be, let's say, 25,000 megawatts, they focused on that capacity and paid little attention to, do you have enough flexibility in your committed fleet to meet the needs every hour towards that peak. So they realized that was a deficiency. We started working on as I said, 3 energy standards. I happen to be on all 3 standards, and we're going to post 1 short-term needs within the next month for industry comments. And again, that really shows the need for flexible capacity, and it is a really important study that we do currently. We just need to figure out how we're going to do this study. Some of the conversations I had internally at the ISO, we think we may be doing probabilistic analysis to determine, in the near term, probably 5 to 7 days out, do we have enough flexible capacity to meet the energy needs every hour, as simply meeting the capacity needs. So let me pause there to see if anyone has any questions on the changes taking place in the industry and what we did so far.
There's one question in the chat from Steve Campbell. On slide 10, was the 2023 BTM capacity an actual value or a forecasted value?
Pardon me, Elena, what was that? What capacity?
The BTM capacity.
So the yellow, that was the capacity. And as I said, CC looks at that capacity and they predict the production. So again, that was not included in the analysis, but it's there to show or to give folks an idea as to how much behind the meter solar we have. And again, the reason why we decided to show that is behind the meter impacts system frequency just as grid connected solar, and it impacts the need for flexible capacity, right? So even though sometimes you may say, well, the actual that we show, I want folks to keep in mind that does not include behind the meter solar.
Okay, and I don't have any other hands. No other hands raised.
Okay, let's move on to slide 12. So slide 12, I think we went over this in February, but the flex capacity assessment, we start off with the CC's forecast, 1 and 2. We use that for the load forecast. And then we take the most recent full year wind and solar. So actually load, wind, and solar. So that gives us a good indication as to the flexible capacity needs, looking at these minute by minute data sets. So for 2025, in the next slide, you'd see what we do. We look at the actual 1 minute production for 2023, and then we scale that by capacity, monthly capacity. So the first thing that we do is we generate load profiles. We generate solar profiles for all years, 25 through 27. Actually, we also do 2024. So 2024 through 2027. And then we take the net load, the forecasted net load for 24, 25, 26, 27 to get a feel as to what the flexible capacity needs going to be in those years. Slide 13, please. So next slide. Okay. So for the CEC 1 and 2 forecasts, we actually use, and you have the link to the CEC's 1 and 2 forecast. I think it's called CED 2023 hourly forecast. So we use column T, which is the managed net load. And then you can see what the CEC does when they include this, or to calculate this managed net load. They look at things like, EV, expected EV charging. They look at behind the meter solar production. And so they come up with the net load, which is column T. And that's what we use when we do our analysis. So all of that information is on the website. So anyone wants to go back and look, simply look at column T, and that's the hourly forecast that we use when we generate the flexible capacity for those years. Next slide, please. So this is an interesting slide that the short-term forecasting group created. Essentially what it is, we look at the hourly forecast that the CEC provides us, which is that blue hourly forecast head that's on the top left. And then we overlay the actual 2023 1-minute data, which is that green curve. So the next thing that we do is we take that minute by minute actual 2023 load, and we calculate the hourly profile. So we break out that minute by minute data into hourly profiles, which is the top, which is step 1, the top right. And then the difference between the green and the blue is that purple straight line. When you look at the bottom, step 2, that purple line, when you change the y-axis, you can see the variability. And then short-term forecasting, what they do is they run a smoothing routine to smoothen out that hourly variability between let's say this is 2025, so between 2025 forecast, 2023 actual. Again, the purple is the difference between those two hourly, and then we run smoothing forecast so that it'll be easy to calculate runs. So again, looking at step 3, that orange straight line, well, it looks like a straight line, but again, the orange, if you look at the left, step 2, pretty variable. And that's what we call X. And this is what we add if you look at slide 15. Slide 15 is really mathematical representation as to what we do. So for 2025 load, with the minute-by-minute load, we take the 2023 actual 1 minute load and we add that smoothing X. So we do that for 2025, 26, 27, and that's how we come up with the 1 minute load forecast. Next slide, next 2 slides, and then we can pause. Slide 17. So net load, again, it's a NERC accepted matrix where we evaluate the flexible capacity needs to accommodate renewables. Just to reiterate, when NERC started looking way back in 2014 as to what it would take to integrate higher and higher levels of renewables, we created the work group, which was comprised of balancing authorities, RTOs, and ISOs from throughout the U.S. We came up with 3 things. One, ERCOT was very vocal in frequency control, and they decided frequency control should be an essential, reliable service. ISO New England, voltage was very important to them, and I brought up flexible capacity, which was very important, or is very important to us in the West, only because we have so much solar. So the essential 3 services that NERC creates or created to integrate higher and higher levels of renewables is frequency control, voltage control, and flexible capacity. So slide 18, please. Slide 18, this is what we do when we calculate flexible capacity. We look at the maximum 3-hour runs, and then we take the greater off the most severe single contingency, or roughly 3.5% of the forecasted peak demand of the month. So this is how we calculate flexible capacity. Since we started this, we never really added a term to the epsilon. So it's strictly flexible capacity is your maximum 3-hour run plus the greater of your most severe single contingency, or roughly 3.5% of your forecasted peak. Essentially, this is how we calculate flex capacity needs. And I'm going to pause there to see if there are any questions.
There's no new hands, but I wanted to go back and clarify a little bit for that question from back in slide 10 for that BTM capacity. Can you cover that again, if that was a forecasted or an actual value?
So,
and Steve, I don't know if you can.
So the yellow, right? The first yellow for each year is what the load serving entities submitted to us as to the expected capacity that's going to be in their system. And this is, again, at the end of the year. So at the end of 2023, the load serving entities, they told us they would expect to have 15,370 megawatts of capacity. We, in short-term forecasting, we do have forecasting providers that give us an indication as to how much forecast we'd expect to see every day by hour. And in some cases, you know, that goes down to on a 5-minute basis. But what the CEC also sends us when we send out the data request is what they expect as production. So the maximum production the CEC expects each year is what's shown at the bottom there, where we said CEC's forecast. Right, so everything here is forecast. So CEC's forecast is at the bottom. The LSC's forecast as capacity at the end of each one of these years is shown at the top.
Just to add, Clyde did a great job describing, but just note that the CEC's is the forecasted production max for that year. So that is a little different than
Right.
capacity.
Right. So that's the max, right? And again, this information does not go into the flex capacity analysis. It's just to show, because sometimes, folks outside the ISO, they ask how much capacity you guys have on the system. And the CC, I think they do have a capacity also, but with this information we get from the load serving entities, I tend to like to use that capacity because it's an indication they know their system better than anybody else. And if as an aggregate, we see, 15,370, I think that's a good number to use as forecasted capacity at the end of 2023.
Yeah, and just to add one more highlight, and hopefully this takes care of your question, Steve, is that the IPER forecast, the CEC's IPER forecast, as Clyde went through, is used in the FlexRA study annually. The CEC forecasted rooftop solar information or behind-the-meter solar information is within the IPER forecast that is used for the FlexRA study. So it is within there. I hope that helps.
And then can we circle back with Steve and make sure he's okay with the responses?
Yeah, Steve said thank you, and he appreciates the follow-up.
Okay, all right. So I think we were on slide 18, unless there are any more questions.
And there's no other questions, thank you.
Okay, so again, going over there, this is how we calculate the flexible capacity. It's two inputs that goes in there, the maximum 3-hour ramp, and then the contingency reserve that goes in there. And for those of you familiar with operation, contingency reserve is an indication as to when the ISO would call an emergency. So some of you may be familiar with the EEA 1, 2, and 3. They all are based on contingency reserve, and when you call that emergency operation trigger. So slide 19. So this year, when we did the analysis for 2025, the blue is the 3-hour ramps that we calculated. The orange is the flex capacity. So again, it's the max, the difference between the blue and orange is the max of most severe single contingency of 3.5% of contingency reserve. So this is what we calculated for 2025. And then I think 2 more slides and then we can pause again. So slide 20. So slide 20 shows the actual flex capacity. Well, this first one shows the actual 3-hour ramps we saw in the system from 2020 through 2023. And the only great takeaway from this is we can see it's increasing every year since 2020. And the same pattern we saw with the flex capacity. So moving on to slide 21. Slide 21 shows the actual and then the forecasted ramp, which is the last 3 bars to the right each month. So the first 3 is actually the actual that we experienced in 2023. And we showed in 2024, which is the third bar that goes through March, is what we experienced so far in 2024 in terms of the ramps that we saw, and then the forecast. Now, looking at the forecast, one thing I wanted to mention in here is when we do the forecast, as I said, we include the dynamic imports of renewables, and it's something, we have to do. We also we do not, so the ISO does not really incorporate curtailments, renewable curtailments. So the forecast of ramps that we show is the maximum ramps that we would expect to see each month. And again, we will be looking at this again internally after this flex capacity study to review what it is we do and how we can make this study a little better. But for right now, again, the dynamic imports that's coming in, we do spin or we do firm that 4-second variability. The only difference is it comes in, or we count that as an inter-type flow or as an import into the ISO. So when we look at actuals, we simply look at load minus wind minus solar, and we take the wind and solar internal to the ISO. We do not take the dynamic imports, right? Only because, it comes in as an import, but it's dynamically imported, right? So technically, some folks will say, well, it should be included, right? Rightfully so, because the ISO spins and got to take care of the variability. So slide 21, so two more, and then we could pause. Slide 22. So slide 22, same thing. This shows the flexible capacity that we actually experienced in 23, and then for the first 3 months in 2024, that shows shows up as green, and then we show the forecast flexible capacity needs. And then let's look at the next slide and then pause for questions. Oh, and this slide, okay, this is a good place where we can pause. This slide here shows you the blue is what we had forecasted for 2023. So the red is the actual 3-hour ramps. And then the green is when we went back and added the curtailments, not the dynamic schedules. We just added the curtailments to the renewables. And you can see in a lot of the months, the green is higher than the actual ramps that we experience. So let me pause there and see if there are any questions.
Okay, we have a hand from Doug Boccignone. Doug, go ahead.
Hi, Doug.
Hi, Clyde. This is Doug Boccignone from Flynn Resource Consultants for the Bay Area Municipal Transmission Group. I'm having a hard time understanding this issue. How do I want to say this? It looks to me like the actuals account for the renewable curtailments, but the forecast maybe doesn't account for the real renewable curtailment. So it seems like our forward-looking forecast is going to overstate the 3-hour net load ramp, unless there's some kind of adjustment for that.
Right. So Doug, when we look at these, right, you're correct in that it's very difficult to predict which hour, what month we're going to be curtailing or how much, right? So we had made a decision, a while back that we're not going to include curtailments because it's just going to be subjective, right? It's anyone's guess what that curtailment is going to be 2 o'clock in September 2025, sitting here, right? So we decided to look at what's that ramp going to be back then. And as I said, this year we plan to take a comprehensive look at everything that we did in the past. We run this through stakeholders eventually. You're going to have a chance to help us fine-tune this whole process moving forward. But that's one of the things, we have that concern also. And this is one of the things, that we plan on doing for next year and beyond.
Yeah, thanks, Clyde. I appreciate that. I guess what's causing me some pause here is my expectation would be that we're going to see more and more renewable curtailment until there's more storage or more transmission built. And so until we catch up, the storage and the transmission, I would think that the renewable curtailment we've actually been experiencing, we would expect to continue to happen, or even potentially at a greater level. And if it seems like my recollection was the way we designed this, for adding new resources, we were essentially going to scale up the actual observations of what we had seen in the past. But it looks like we're scaling it up, but we're like stripping out the curtailments that we've observed.
Right. So
and then I think I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Good.
Well, I think we're gonna, if we continue down this path, we're gonna be grossly overstating the 3-hour netload ramp.
Right. So as I said, we're going to take a comprehensive look at everything, right? As soon as we get this, I think starting in May, I think the ISO plan, the plan right now, and that's covered in the last slide in my section. We plan to take a serious look at this overall flex capacity analysis to see how we can fine-tune it. Now, one thing I noticed this year, so I was looking at this past Sunday just to see how much curtailments we had. And the curtailments, usually in April, you tend to see huge numbers, right, because of the hydro spill, the snowmelt, plus renewables. And I'm not seeing the curtailments we saw in 2022, and I'm not sure right now, and this was just looking selected days, right? I'm not sure if more renewables is being shipped to EIM participants or what's happening. So these are the kind of studies that we're going to be looking at to see exactly how it is we need to modify the studies moving forward. But there's a lot of moving parts right now. And again, the two biggest pieces, as you correctly stated, one is the curtailment, two is the dynamic imports. We will be looking at both of these.
Yeah, and I just want to add, Doug, I think Clyde did a great job describing it. There's two things. One, and we did bring this up in the RA workshops that have been going through, so more conversations will happen there. Please, attend and provide comments, because I do think that those will be helpful to further improve the product. But the second thing is that the actual data that is utilized does have curtailment information in it. So we don't directly forecast, and this level of details in the paper, we don't forecast the curtailments, right, because they have a lot of moving pieces to them. But the previous year's data does have embedded actual curtailment information in there, so they're indirectly within the study. And there's some more detail on that in the paper too, so that might be helpful, but I think there's improvements that can be made to the curtailment process and how curtailments are factored in, and that's what we're highlighting in the RA working groups.
Thanks, Amber. I appreciate that. I just wonder if what might be happening is when we're scaling sort of Pmax megawatts against the net curtailed megawatts, and instead of against the Pmax of installed capacity. And so our scaling approach seems to me maybe overstating it, particularly in the sort of shoulder months when you were not actually getting as, anywhere near Pmax output.
So
And I
I
would
think
wonder
those are
if that
the
was
level.
the scaling
Yeah.
that we do, right, is wind and solar. We scale that based on capacity each month, right? So the 1 minute actual wind and solar, let's say for 2023, that's what's scaled, and that's scaled by the monthly wind and solar capacity. So I think that's a pretty solid assumption to make based on monthly capacity. The load is something, we use the CEC's hourly load forecast. So it's not like a monthly peak that we use. We take the hourly CEC's forecast, and that's what we're working with right now. And that's another thing, we're going to take a second look at to see if that's the best way to move forward. But it's not the monthly peak for load that we scale, it's the hourly load.
Got it. Thanks. Well, I'd be interested in following up with this in the RA process.
Yeah. And as Ahmed said, we'd also be interested in hearing, suggestions that you guys have that can help us with this.
Great. Thanks, Clyde. Thanks, Amber.
Hmm. So,
we don't have any other questions or hands. And I did post the registration report link for those interested.
okay, Lena, can we move on to slide 24 then? So slide 24, I like this slide because it tells you a lot. And for some of you guys that have been in the industry for a while, in the old days, we had about 12 to 14 hours to go from Pmin to Pmax in terms of load, right? So what we're really showing here now is we need to run, if you look at January. So what the red diamonds is really the peak demand for that day. And the blue and orange is the 3-hour ramp and 1-hour ramp for that same day. So what we're showing, if you look at January, is November might be a better example. So November is really saying, look, the 3-hour ramp was 70% off the peak demand for that day. So when you look at moving 18,000 megawatts in 3 hours, think back about 10 years ago, we had 14 hours to do that. So the fleet was adequate in that you had old clunkers that could ramp between 2 and 22 megawatts a minute. We had 3 fast moving hydro units. But now, almost every month except, June, July, August, you got ramps, 3-hour ramps that's humongous. I mean, it's a lot of megawatts you're trying to move in 3 hours. So off the bat, it tells you you need a faster fleet that would do this. And then the 1-hour ramp, which is the orange, within the 3-hour ramp, is not evenly distributed. So again, if you look at November says 54% of that 3-hour ramp you needed in 1 hour. And in 1 hour, that's almost 10,000 megawatts, which was 9,759 megawatts. So this is the bigger concern that we have. This is the bigger concern that NERC has. Do we have adequate flexibility within the committed fleet? And again, most of the huge ramps that you see, it happens on a Saturday or a Sunday or a holiday. That's when you have or tend to see high renewable production, low loads. So you cannot commit a lot of dispatchable resources. So the question there is, where are you going to get that ramp? So this is from another level, what we try to ascertain right now is how do you study that, right? Because just RUMP is just one part of the equation, right? When we commit resources, you commit resources to balance supply and demand. And in our cases, we do that through the 5-minute market and then through every 4 seconds for RAG. But on top of that, we need to make sure we have things like frequency response, contingency reserve that we could dispatch. One, you dispatch through the market, you may have time. The other one, you dispatch in 10 minutes, else you're going to get a DCS. And I know some of you guys are familiar with that when you have a contingency. We only got 10 minutes to recover from that, or you could face up to $1 million in fine from NERC and FERC, right? So when we operate in addition to flexible capacity, we got to make sure we have other variables in the system that can help us with different standards that we got to comply with. Flexible capacity is just one of those inputs, right? And the message here is really saying, look, we need to get faster moving devices on the system. We need to see how we can get things like renewables, variable energy resources. How can they provide flexibility, right? So there's a slew of, I think, solutions out there where I think this work group could help us, come up with potential solutions, because definitely with these kind of RUMPs, you cannot rely on your existing fleet for flexible capacity. I mean, if your load is about 50,000 megawatts, you could commit pretty close to, 30,000 megawatts of flexible capacity to meet that high load. But when my load is 20,000 megawatts, you cannot commit that much dispatchable gen. So again, these are some of the things we need to think of, looking for ideas as to how we can utilize wind, solar to provide flexibility. We had some ideas a while back from, I think it was First Solar. They were suggesting we start looking at the RUMPs across 4 hours, and they would start ramping down 1 hour before sunset. We talked about it, but it never really moved forward. But any kind of ideas you can think of that we could potentially look at to reduce those RUMPs would help. I'm seeing right now EIM is helping, and it's just to what extent, right? And again, one last point on this is at the ISO, one of the things we try to do is we try to minimize curtailment, because the more renewables you curtail, less those RUMPs going to be. And again, that's one of the least thing or the last resort we want to move to, curtailing renewables. So we're looking at any type of engineering solution we could come up with. And we're looking, again, as I said, for help from anybody that's willing to help come up with creative solutions. Slide 25. Okay, so slide 25 shows the magnitude of curtailments. You can see most of that curtailments is during the spring, and it does show it increasing. I'd be interested to see how 2024 looked on this plot, because so far, they said, the days I looked at, the magnitude, the megawatts, not the megawatt hours, it was less than what we saw in 2023. So again, when we look at the whole year for 2024, it'd be interesting to see how that tallies up. And then one last thing here, if you look at slide 26, 26 shows by hour where most of the curtailment happens. It happens between sunrise and sunset. And again, you can see 22, 23 was prevalent. It was a lot more. I'm curious to see how 2024 lines up with this. 27, I think I just got 2 or 3 more slides. 27 is looking at 7 consecutive days. I'd like to show this slide so that folks will get the idea of how difficult it is to forecast load wind solar rooftop PV on consecutive days. You can see it varies by thousands of megawatts on the horizontal axis and then on the vertical axis. So it's a challenge, but we operate today based on standards we developed for controllable supply and predictable demand. So it's a huge challenge, and this is one of the complaints that the ISO has right now at NUC. And I said this to NUC last month. Look, we operate in the standards were developed for controllable supply, predictable demand. We have variable supply. Our variability is sometimes in excess of 1,500 megawatts in 10 minutes. Yet we got to comply with those standards, and the system ain't going to collapse. So we need to look at ways how we can reduce. And the one I'm talking about is BAL 001. How can we relax those standards in a way where you do not compromise reliability, but still you operate in a way where you could come up with a standard that was designed for variable supply on predictable demand. So we're working, with this group. We're working again with the guys back east, and anything that we can do to try to reduce the curtailment of renewables. These are things that we're looking for. One more slide. I think that's my last slide coming up. So the dock, you can see where we are right now. The maximum 3-hour ramp we saw on September last year, which is kind of abnormal. It was 19,325 megawatts. The minimum net load was 2,085 megawatts. And I don't want to get into it in this slide, but when we operate at minimum net loads of 2,085 megawatts, we got to worry about things like frequency response obligation, downward dispatchability, meeting that huge ramp when you have small amount of gas units online. So it's a slew of other problems that we see when we operate with net loads this low. And it's something, we can discuss at a different time. And I think I got one more slide, Elena, that we can talk about. This is showing the solar actual production net load for that September 24th when we peaked. Our net load peaked at 19,000, or 3-hour ramp peaked at 19,325 megawatts. You can see wind was flat, but the solar just came up. And this has a lot to do with PV tracking, because PV comes up like drastically, it increases, and then it drops off as a rock on evenings across 3 hours. And then think about this. The other challenge that our short-term forecaster has is trying to predict what's happening with that rooftop PV. So that adds on to the grid-connected variability that you see. And then the replacement energy is really, really a challenge. So with that, I think, do I have any more slides there, Elena? Can you move one more? Oh, and this is we talked about this slide. This is showing the flexible capacity by month that we recommended for 2025. And I think, is there one more?
The RA, the working group slide.
Yeah, and this is what we talked about. We're going to regroup and discuss everything that we have been doing over the past few years to see where we need to make improvements. Doug, this is a good place for you to participate, come up with ideas as to how we can make this whole process better moving forward. And I think this is my last slide before I pass this on to Hong. But are there any questions out there, Alina?
There are currently no questions in the chat and no hands raised.
Okay. So back to you, Hong.
Yeah, thank you, Clyde, for this wonderful presentation. And thank you, everyone, to participate in this presentation. Thank you. Can you move, Yolanda, can you move back to 29? 30, let me see. I want to 30, yeah, move to 30. That's my starting point of looking at the bonds. People rightfully observed we may need to do more enhancement, but my starting point is we have this bar. This bar, those bars we present each month how much the ISO estimated 2025 flexible needs, which is the net load, estimated net load ramp plus the contingency reserve. So I'm starting with that's the bar. So we take a few different perspectives by looking at these bars, how much, what type of trends we have seen, and what type of how we do the allocations and all those. So it is noticed we in ISO used to have a little U-shaped estimation, but now the U-shape is the summer month is a little low, and the winter month is high. The shape change a little bit. So can you Yolanda can move back to slide 20. 20. Yeah, you see, look at the yellow bars of 2021. You see how low that the summer months are. The estimation is, and no, that's the actuals, and our estimate is the shape is really reflecting what we had before. So look at the orange bar. Orange bar sort of changed the summer and the winter months starting the October, November or high. It's not the summer is a little higher than before. It's kind of level off all the bars. So the typical U shape is not there anymore when we look at the 2023 actuals. So the shape is more or less represented in the 2030, the slide 30, our estimate in 2025. So even the magnitude increased a few thousand. Can go back to the 30. Thank you, ma'am. Yeah, so that's the shape, and the winter, the January to March is low, and that's a typical. We used to have this low, then so the shape is like this. So that's the first thing I noticed, and I just want to let everybody know. And there were lots of losing pieces, losing ends of this, and we cannot really figure out what's really going on, curtailment or something else. The other forecast. So yeah. So we move forward, please. 31. And then move forward. Then that's the end of the class presentation. Yeah, so that's my starting point. We did the draft preliminary results of this flex needs. Move forward, please. Next, yeah. So no, go back. Yeah. So since the flex needs is net load, the ramp, that's the majority, then we look at how much contribution for each component, load, wind, and solar. Wind is typically, could be up, could be down, it does not contribute much. Then you can see this mainly solar contribution is greater and greater, and the load is a little getting lower and lower. Look at the July, it's even just the quarter, and solar has 3/4 pretty much. So that's the pattern. We look at we cut the bars into the load and wind, and we get the reflect how much solar, and we estimating will contribute to this ramp. So that's this contribution. Can move next. And then we look at the different angle, different perspective. That's called the categories. The category is base, peak, and super peak. I need remind everyone, if especially new to this project, is these categories were defined back in 2014. And back then, we don't have this much solar, and the base is pretty much referring morning ramp, and the peak is evening ramp. That's the original. So we may need some overhaul of this definition. Can you move back to 27? I believe is the slides. Yeah, you look at the morning ramp is kind of flat, and the evening ramp, the 20 already starting from the hour ending 14. So the client mentioned we may need a 4 hour ramp of product instead of 3 hours, because this already 6 hours between the 14 and the 20. And we thought about this going into 5 hours, but we went up. The 3 hours is the steepest of the ramp needs, and that's what we estimation. So the categories does not really reflect what we have. So it's more like a continuous 3 hour, and the first the base and the peak ramp and the secondary ramp are kind of combines one mode. Okay, can you go back to whatever we had before 32 or something? Go forward, move forward. Yeah, these categories are the kind of maybe obsolete. Okay, move forward, next. So then even with this, we carry through all this all the definition of the base and the peak, and we still put this. We need to see each of the base each month. What's the base composition, and is the peak and the super peak is always 5% defined. So it's around the 50 to 75. Then back then we found the U shape of the flex needs, and then we see the fluctuations among the base of peak need, the base need. That's the fluctuations among the wind and the solar to stabilize these fluctuations between the seasons. We call it summer season and the winter season, and then we did this kind of averages. So basically stabilize the fluctuation of the base, the estimated fluctuations of this basic flexibility. So look at the January, February, March, and April, and October, November. We doing up the average, the number of 29 for this called winter months, and these summer months is 41. Before the base is arriving from 27 to 42 and 20, and so this is just a kind of stabilization of all the base needs. Since these maybe the whole thing may be obsolete, and the little detail of averages may be gone when we have a new way of doing these categories, and so this is just the way of mathematical calculation. Thank you. Let me go next. So the peak categories, we see over years, look at the yellow or orange one is keep increasing from the 21 to 22 and the 23 to 24. And I would say 50 in 2025, the 54 is still an increase, although the number is decreasing from 2024, but is compared to 2021, we still see this level off of this increased the peak categories. So yeah, so maybe next some observations may not have too much. We cannot choose too much on this, get this more meaningful conclusion out of this. But that's the typical trend. The peak load is keep increasing and the level off in 2024. Next. Yeah, so go back to the slide 36 and stop for a question. Yeah, any question?
Currently, no questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So move to next. So then the after we finish these averages of this each peak, each category in peak and base and super peak. So that's the remember that's the same height as the orange bar I started with. So September is the highest. And but each categories have its own numbers. The average, the percentile in the summer months is the same, but since the height of each bar are varying, so the accordingly each category percent will be the same, but the absolute value of megawatts of needs is keep changing within the same season and for each month. So go next. So this is how much CPUC will be allocated. Then they will do the sub-allocation of how much flex needed for each categories, and the shape is pretty much the same as the overall. And look at the September, here is 25, little over 25,000, and the ISO total need is around 26 or 27. So typically the CPUC territory need 90-ish, 90 to 95-ish of overall the allocation. The rest, the 5 to 10% will be allocated to rest of smaller LRAs. So next, and also the draft allocation for each of LRA will be finished in one week. So then this is most offer hours by looking at the starting time by hour ending. When the 3-hour net load starting, and sometimes we started at 14, as we observed that some and 15, and so you can see these are the kind of the horseshoe type of the shape. It was observed the same as the last year, in the year before. This is because the starting hour is always, not often, always caused by the solar goes down, and then the typical load will not contribute much. The shape is like this. So we look at what the base when it started, what's the each month, how we basically to determine the most of the offer hours, which will be 5 hours. Go to next. So remember this shape. So this shape is also reflected into this most recommended. That's the same as the last year. and the winter months of January, February, November are the same, and the summer months, that's a little different than the flex need, but the starting time is about this. And you can see this category, this recommendation is coincide with the shape we saw from the last slides. Go next. Thank you. Okay, so I have been discussing each bullet point into this is just a summary. So I start here for if you have more questions or you have any questions before I present the AAH.
There's no questions, thank you.
Okay, so thank you. Go move to next. So this is availability assessment hours. So the must offer, the recommendation is based on the net load starting hour. Here the AAH is by looking at the load hours. The methodology is more or less the same. Can move to next. You want to see when it has the biggest the load. Then that's where we need to have this AAH is coming from the ISO standard, and so this determining the hours of greatest the need, which that means is maximum estimated maximum load for those hours. So then at the end, the resources are rewarded for available during these hours. So go to next. So see this, we have the main thing is the main base for this study is for the CEC's idle forecast. Then we combine some would be make little adjustment by the what we observed in 2023, and that's the methodology. Just by looking at the top load, 5% load of for each month, for each hour, we'll see what type of recommendation we can have. Go next. So look at the shape of the 2025. Look at the right table. So that's the idle forecasted load, which typically reach to the maximum 95% of within that hour in that month. So you can see this is the hours by kind of stripping this hour into different seasons: winter, spring, summer, and the winter. Then the recommendation is summarized at the top. And by looking at the left table, the 2023, the top 5% load hours are, hey, is not that far off from the 2025 estimating. The numbers may be from the may be different in each of these hours, but roughly the overall, the whole piece, the pattern of the very similar. So that is kind of, we use this to kind of calibrate our recommendation. So then the further go next. We further want to make the to visualize and what the recommendation is for each of month. Then if we plotted orange is the actuals, and the blue, solid blue line is this actual forecast. So you can see for each month of recommendation, we will reach the highest in the 95 months of the load forecast of top 5%. Then it's pretty much the same of the hours. It may not be the same value, but roughly the shape is still is keep the same. So that's really a proof of our recommendation is based on the actual forecast is supported by the actuals observed in the ISO's 2023 actuals load. That's not the net load. Go next, winter month, and that's spring month, and go next. That's the summer month, and go next. That's the summer month. So basically, this graph is, all these are not really scientific methodology. It's just the recommendation based on what we have observed. So go next. I think that might be my last presentation, except that the further say, hey, we have what the accommodations is summer, winter is August 17 and 21, and they have shifting in the 3 months of the spring season. That's the category of summer, winter, and the spring is the same as the last year, so no change. So next. Yeah, then that's what we needed to, that's recommendation, and may needed to update some PPM and some of those. So
Hong, can we go back just a couple of slides? I just want to add something for the stakeholders. So we go back to that, the one right in front of that. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. 2 ahead. The other direction. So
51.
Forward. Yeah.
Yeah, that one.
There we go. Yeah, I just wanted to highlight this. So as we go through the AAH study, the availability assessment hours, we're looking at the CEC's IPER forecast in combination to the trend that we see over the years in the actuals. And the actuals that we see are very dependent on different weather conditions, which we have to keep in mind as we're doing the AAH recommendations. One of the things that we saw in both the actuals that Hong was going through previously, as well as in the CEC's forecast that we're heavily monitoring to see if a change is needed, is the shift for December, January, and February. So right now, those months, as you see in the recommendation for 2025, are 17 through 21. We will be keeping them 17 through 21 for 2025 year. But in the estimates, we wanted to make it really clear that we're seeing this pattern for comments that the months of December, January, and February are really starting to show a later shift of the hour ending 18 through 22 time period. So as the new forecast updates come in, because we have to get the new forecast update from the CECs, as well as the actuals from this next year, when we form the study, we'll really determine if we make that change, but we wanted to put an advisory statement out there for those months to the community. So please note that we are seeing some shifts in the data. We did not change them for 2025, but we did make advisory estimate changes that won't become final until we get the new latest information. But this is really important for the stakeholders. So I just wanted to emphasize that a little bit.
Thank you, Amber. So that's the end of my presentation, and if no more question, and Yolanda is yours, slide 53.
Next slide.
53, yeah.
Okay, so the next steps here is that the comments are due by the end of the day on April 29th. You can submit them through the recurring process page for this. And yeah, please reach out to us if you have any other questions, and add all your comments in there. That comment template will be posted in the next 24 to 48 hours, and then we will be publishing the final flexible capacity needs assessment for 2025 on May 17th. Next slide. We've got to save the date for, oh yeah, Amber, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on the comments too. We really do want to hear your guys' comments to the process, especially during this draft to final round. So if you guys have any comments, please submit them into our process. I know at times, sometimes there is a comment submittal process within the CPUC side too. Please note that the FlexRA study comments really would be helpful to have in this commenting period. Once we get into that CPUC side, it is too late for changes. So comment here. RA Stakeholder Working Group, also a great place to be commenting. And we look forward to what you guys have to say as we prepare for the final. And with that, I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you so much, Amber. So this is the save the date for May 1st. We have a new resource implementation, and there's a link there to register. You can attend it in person, and we always have all our meetings hybrid, so it will also be on WebEx. Next page. Okay, and then we also have the save the date for our stakeholder symposium this year. It's going to be on October 30th, and then we will also have a welcome reception on the evening of October 29th. And we've got a separate email set up for that. You can email, and I think we will also have a page you can visit with all of our information there. I don't think we have that ready. Last page. Do we have any other questions? Okay. Thank you, everybody. Please remember to submit your comments, and thank you so much for joining us today. We can end this conference, Yolanda.
The conference is now over. You may now disconnect. Have a great day.